In another seemingly crushing blow to Britain, the economy unexpectedly shrank by 0.1% in January, increasing fears that we could be slipping our way towards recession later this year. Now, the figures come ahead of the Chancellor's spring statement, which is expected to include government spending cuts. And here's what Conservative frontbencher Robert Jenrick told GB News earlier today.
No, I don't think this is unexpected at all, frankly. This is a result of the political decisions that were taken by Rachel Reeves in her disastrous budget last year by hiking taxes on working people and businesses across the country. They've killed growth. The last Conservative government left this one the fastest growing economy in the G7.
Well, let's pick this conversation up now. In the studio, I'm delighted to say I'm joined on this Friday afternoon by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the studio. We were told the foundations would be fixed. We were told after 14 years of Tory chaos, stability had returned as the adults were back in the room, except it feels like we're on a bit of a wobble, doesn't it?
Feels like a long time since the general election and all that hope and optimism of change and growth. So here we are. The economy shrank by 0.1% in January. It was expected to grow by the same amount. Bad news. OK, it's only a small amount. But the thing is that Rachel Reeves has got that spending spring statement coming in a week and a half. And the budget in October, with those big tax rises on employers' national insurance, is having, according to many, a very bad effect on the economy. I mean, the Shadow Chancellor said this government is a growth killer. The Lib Dems have said the Chancellor wrecked the wretched budget has left our economy on life support. And it's not looking good. And Rachel Reeves, when she made those big and very unpopular decisions, said, you know, look, this is a once in Parliament event. The implication was she wouldn't have to come back and do more terrible things. But look, her fiscal headroom has gone. She's out of money. It's looking like more cuts are going to have to be made, or more taxes or more tax thresholds squeezed. Yeah, it's not a good outlook. And worth saying, I was in the briefing with the Prime Minister's spokesman with lobby journalists. The first question was, is this Donald Trump's fault? Well, these figures are for January, before Trump had even come in, and the effect of his liking of tariffs and his saying to Europe, you know, you've got to pay up for Ukraine and pay up now, means that the economic outlook is only getting harder.
Makes you wonder how long they can get away with blaming. First it was Putin, now it's Trump. There's always some nefarious influence over the water that seems to be to blame. Perhaps it's something nearer to home. This seems to be driven ostensibly by high energy prices. We have the highest electricity prices in all of the Western world, and no sign of that coming to any end anytime soon. In fact, a GB News exclusive out today. We're covering that in a bit. 450 quid for every household. And a lot of these costs that households are facing are also because of increased business costs. There's the national insurance hike, there's the minimum wage hike, every business paying more to produce everything because of those energy costs. And the net result is people are starting to tighten their belts.
Yeah, and I mean, manufacturing sank last month. As you've said, energy costs are through the roof in this country, and that's, you know, part of the problem with industries like steel is it's so expensive to make stuff here. But I think for all the sort of gloating from the Conservatives, and they're saying, look, you know, we had the highest growth in the G7, the fact of the matter is, and it's backed up by a report out yesterday, that since the financial crisis, the British economy has been pretty flat and our productivity has been atrocious. Other countries recovered much better from the financial crisis, and we haven't. And the result is now that we're in a situation where average living standards in this country are nearly on a par with that in Slovenia, and not very wealthy Eastern European countries.
It really is humbling to hear that. That came out, of course, a couple of days ago. Politically, Catherine, do you think yet the knives are out for the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves? She hasn't really had a good news day since that budget. Then there was her CV. There's all sorts of kind of murkiness around her. And she was the first female Chancellor. It was all trumpeted as this brave new era, this new dawn. hasn't got off to the best of starts, and it doesn't look particularly rosy moving forward. Will politically this be a problem for her? Could she be losing her job?
I'm going to stick my neck out and say no. Obviously, the budget went down very badly. They're still feeling the effects, like the farmers, for just one example, are not going away. There were tractors in Westminster yesterday. And then at the beginning of the year, all the stuff about her CVs, it was very bumpy. But I feel that it has settled now. This is bad news, but what she will do, and in fairness, going forward, it will be a factor. She's saying, look, the world has changed. Money for defence, tariffs and so on and so forth. And that will be true. And I think in some ways that may going forward be used as a little bit of a sort of shield.
Catherine Forster, cracking start to the show. Thank you very, very much. And let's continue this conversation now because I'm joined with the independent economist, Julian Jessup. Julian, welcome to the show. So 0.1% doesn't sound terrible, but it feels like something is in the air. Is this a blip? Or could it be the beginnings of something a bit more perilous? Could we be sliding towards recession?
Well, it's not yet a disaster. As you said in your introduction, the economy did grow by more than expected in December, 0.4%. So what we've seen today is partly just a correction to that. I think underlying growth in the economy is probably about 0.2% a quarter. The problem, though, is that that's far too feeble to help boost the public finances. We get the what I'm not allowed to call an emergency budget in a week or so's time. And that'll be based on forecasts from the OBR, the Independent Fiscal Watchdog, that are bound to be a lot weaker than those that were baked into the October budget last year. So partly as a result of the tax increases announced then and other measures the government has taken on the labour market, on energy prices in particular, business and consumer confidence has tanked. So I don't think a recession is certain. It's possible some of the weakness we're seeing now is just the weakness we're going to get anyway in April brought forward. But the downside risks are growing. And it's not just domestically that we have problems. There's the growing threat of a tariff war driven by the US as well.
But perhaps the Chancellor, perhaps, dare I say it, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who, don't forget, campaigned to reverse Brexit for 3 years as head of the People's Vote movement, perhaps he might be grateful for Brexit. As you said, we've been spared being dragged into any tariff wars with the European Union because we're a free, independent, sovereign nation. There isn't 20% tariffs being placed on Scotch whisky. There's 20% tariffs being placed on stuff going from the European Union. So could Brexit be giving the Labour Party a surprising bump?
I think absolutely yes. I mean, this is one of the most obvious Brexit opportunities, is that we don't have to follow EU trade policy. It's already happened in the case of the EU's tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, which we didn't have to follow. Now we've been able to step aside from the worst of the trade war breaking out between the US on the one side and Canada, Mexico and the EU on the other. So long may that continue. I think it's absolutely right that we shouldn't retaliate with tariffs of our own, because that would simply add to the pain on UK firms and consumers who would otherwise be buying stuff from the US. So I think this is an opportunity for the government to start making some of the most of the benefits of Brexit.
Well, Julian Jessup, I knew at some point in the future Sir Keir Starmer would say, "Vive la Brexit." Perhaps today is the day. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Julian Jessup, and of course, Catherine Forster, delightful as ever.